I'm really honored to just be the moderator for two amazing educators. I want to start with a quick story. I was out with my running group on a long run. We were a couple hours into the run, and one of the guys in my running group, we were talking about education, and he said, well, there's really only one thing that matters about a teacher. And I thought, really? Only one thing? And I turned to him and I said, is there really only one thing that matters? Because I've been in education more than 45 years and I have no idea what that one thing is. So I'm really interested in what your next sentence is going to be. And he said, yeah, there's really only one thing. And that's, if you're a teacher, how much do you believe in each student? That's all that matters. And I said, yeah, say more. And he said, well, look, I grew up poor and I'm not white. And I was like the kid that no one believed in. And every teacher thought, you're just one of those kids who's going nowhere. They thought that about me. They treated me that way. That's the kind of work they gave me. That's the way they always dealt with me. But in my whole career, I had two teachers who didn't think that way about me, who thought I had potential. And they loved me, and they pushed me, and they listened to me, and they said, you have potential, Albert. You're going somewhere. And because of those two teachers, I'm getting my PhD next year. And no one in my family graduated from high school. They believed in me. That's the only thing that matters. And I thought, it's really hard to say you're wrong there. Now, I will say he's wrong. It's not the only thing that matters, because you actually need a classroom culture and a school culture and an infrastructure that, more than just your attitude, you have to have the way your classroom runs and the way your school runs also has to give kids that sense that you're challenging them, that you believe in them, and that you know they're going somewhere. It's not just your attitude, but it starts with your attitude. And so I have the honor of sharing with you two educators who really embody that amazingly. We, EL Education, we work with partners that serve 500,000 students, most of them students of low income. We have a yearly Teacher of the Year award. Erick Espin won that award. We have a yearly School Leader of the Year award. And Minh, Nguyen won that award. But they are not the typical State Teacher of the Year, National Teacher of the Year kind of people. They're not going to sound like that. They are deep in the work in a very humble way, and they're not afraid to be political and vulnerable in how they share. They don't think about, how do I make this sound good? How do I make myself sound good? We just met outside in the park, and it was just all humility. And you know where that is, because when you're a great teacher, all you can think of are the things you're not good enough. When you're a great school leader, you think of everything that's not good enough. So I'm pushing them to lead with their strengths too. They are amazing leaders and teachers. And so we're just going to start with their personal stories. So Erick, we'll start with you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Is this too loud? Close. This is good. Erick Espin, history teacher, high school, New York City, born and raised. My family's from the Dominican Republic, and they immigrated in the 70s. And did I say this is my 20th year teaching? Well, I don't. You're probably gonna see 20 years coming out in these stories, but 20th year teaching, and I'm just excited to be here and have this conversation and be as real as possible with you guys. Hopefully you learn from me and I learn from all of you. So
before you pass that on,
check one.
Can you talk about the neighborhood you grew up in and what happened to you when you were picked as a talented kid and how you ended up back in that same neighborhood?
Got it. You know some of my story.
My job.
Yeah. New York City, the area is anyone from New York City? Word up, word up. So, Washington Heights, Inwood, um, the story we've heard too often. Low income, immigrant community, black and brown, grew up in public housing, family still in public housing. But I was, I kind of did well in school. And because of that, some of my teachers identify me and say, oh, you should apply to this. So when I was in elementary, oh, you should apply to go to this magnet school. So I applied, got in. I was like, wow, this is amazing. I'm going to this school. While I was at the magnet school, a teacher said, you should apply to this program. And the program led me to boarding school. So that was like a first major culture shock. I saw things in New York that I picked up on. Things are not the same for everyone, even in my neighborhood, but I think going away to boarding school kind of just amplified it, and then going away to college. So I left home at 14, came back at 23, very different person, my mom would say. But that's some of the experiences that I think school afforded me. So does that work?
But I also want to point out that you've said many times, the higher you got pushed, the fewer people you saw that looked like you, and the fewer people that wanted you to go back to where you started to teach.
He's good. Yeah, so as I was experiencing these things, when I was in high school, it's a very white space, ridiculous amounts of money, right? And I navigated those 4 years with a big shield around me. Like, I don't know where this came from, but I knew it was very apparent to me. Like, I had to keep people at a distance. I do not trust this situation. Someone's gonna say something or do something, and I'm gonna have to lose it. So I kept people at a distance, really to protect myself. I learned, sadly, senior year, that wasn't fair to them and it wasn't fair to me. I missed out on a lot of things, to be honest. But I was already kind of working through feelings I was having. I just didn't understand them. And then going away to college, it was like the more successful, at least society told me I was surrounded by less and less people who looked like me. And that just kind of bothered me more and more. I also didn't really accept the narrative that I was one of the few. I grew up around tons of people who were talented and had gifts. I also didn't believe well, if I'm one of the few, that means people who look like me don't have many gifts because no one's here with me. And I was like, I don't believe that either. And so that kind of led me to, I didn't want to be a teacher. If you asked me sophomore year in college, and people were started to do this, are you going to be a teacher? And I'm like, are you crazy? I would never be a teacher. Lo and behold, 2 years later, well, actually, junior year, I'm starting a school on my college campus, like a Saturday school. But that was the idea of teaching, kind of representing that opportunity, that idea that we all have this gift inside of us. We are just not given the same opportunity. And I wanted to kind of represent that. I feel like I owed that to my ancestors. I owed that to my community. Everything that I've lived is not just because of me. These things are way bigger than me. And my story happened centuries ago, millennia ago. So I kind of feel that responsibility in kind of how I move and how I operate. It's also why I'm a history teacher. So.
Thank you.
You got
it. Erick, why do you think you won the Teacher of the Year award?
Are you serious?
Yeah, I'm serious. What do you think? I mean, what other people saw, but what do you think is your sauce?
Well, I don't think an award set means I have sauce, but I do have sauce. But I'm always skeptical of awards and a group of people saying something. I'm a hip hop dude, and I'm the best people in hip hop never got the awards sometimes. The best people, so it's I don't put too much faith in that, but it does feel a certain way to be acknowledged. I think maybe what EL saw is really what I think you should be doing from the get-go if you're a teacher. And I think that might come out in these conversations. But to be honest, alluding to this conversation in the running group, 2 hours until the run? Whoa. My run is 20 minutes. But I think seeing my students as people, like, I remember feeling like this society doesn't see me as a person. My teachers, I had some teachers who didn't see me as a person. I definitely know that. And then I had teachers who did see me as a person. And I think that's how I move, that's how I operate. I think everybody deserves that. I don't care if you're just born or you're 65, you deserve to be treated with respect and dignity. And so I think I operate that way. I'm in my class that way. I try to raise my son that way. And so I think that might be a little bit of what EL saw, maybe. Some of my sauce.
So we can have dialogue. We can do like a whole MC thing, back and forth, and I'll just follow you. Hi everyone. My Vietnamese name, it's my name in Vietnamese is Nguyen Ngọc Minh Trâm. I don't expect you to be able to say that. I want to start with just a little bit of the frame of who I am in that, Vietnam had 1,000 years of Chinese imperialism. Under that time, there were 11 names that our country went through. So that means 11 efforts for independence, right? So each time people renamed the country, and each time, so anyways, and within that there were actually men and women who did some kick-ass things to like gain independence, right? You don't hear that part. When you think of Vietnam, you think about sort of just the communists versus the US. And then you have an analysis of the US being the imperialists and the communists being the good guys. It's much more complex than that. My grandfather actually saw the communists coming, and he actually wanted to work on democracy, a different vision to when the French came after 1,000 years of imperialism. So the French were colonizers in Vietnam for 100 years. Why that matters is that my grandfather kind of said, okay, no, we want a democratic Vietnam. So he actually was persecuted, buried alive, disappeared, buried alive. So and then later on when my father tried to kind of undergo sort of finding his father and then joining the military and such, he became a political prisoner. So that trajectory in my sort of family and story and country story, I think a lot about liberation and liberatory. I think a lot about sort of what that means. When you're literally like it's not a romantic notion of some like struggle, political struggle that I think sometimes like political people in the States kind of like wear as a banner. It's like a real story. And so whether the container is in the jungles as a political prisoner or under the ground being buried alive, or in my aunt's case, who also helped raise me, she tried to escape, and then her boat was imprisoned in Vietnam for like 6 months. And all this matters because we're in a conference that is about deeper learning, and there's a lot of talk about liberation. And so I just want you to kind of put a pin right there because of some of the things I think why I do the work and how I do the work. I think it's tied to that. So I'm a refugee, about 5.5 we came over. So I got to experience like a family that had, mom had an 8th grade education, built a successful weaving textile business from her Hamlet's trade, and then basically started all over. We were pirated. Some of you know from another conference, the L conference, I shared that we were pirated when we escaped, and the pirates, one of the things they did was they took our compass. Fast forward, I became a teacher, and when we designed a small autonomous school in the movement in Oakland, California. When we worked with families, we took 3 years to design, and part of the process is that we could have designed very quickly, but the process mattered as much as the product. So we slowed down so the black and brown representation and the family sitting at the table was not just an automatic sign-off. That was true community building, that people had a place where they felt empowered in a community to make decisions. But the name of the school became Encompass Academy, capital E, lowercase n, capital C, O-M-P-A-S-S. And it's the idea of the internal compass. And that you have, that pirates could take away the compass, but you can't take away the inner compass. And that could carry you through colonialism, imperialism, displacement, cross-national, all those things, or in the United States, poverty or whatnot, right? So our school is now, I'm an 18th year in the work as a principal, that is. And but the way we approach the work, the way I think about design, how do we live out the design, COVID has helped kind of break that even more open for us to live more fully into our design, because we were like trying to live within the structure of an urban, large public district. We chose not to be charter because we wanted to be able to have some of the innovations scale up. And the great innovations of many charters, there's a place for that. And my interest is kind of helping kind of scale from the inside. But choosing to scale from the inside means that you have a very restricted container. So hence the tension between liberation and container. I've been thinking a lot about that. And so I think some of the things that I want to posit is that when we think of liberation, we think that you're actually trying to break out of something. You're trying to get, whether it's a state of mind or a physical container, prison, or a school system. I try to use the word liberatory. It's a state of being. Because when we have a state of a place that's a container, it's in relationship to something that constrains us. And so our attention is towards what's constraining us, versus a stance and a freedom from within that is a state of being that you can carry and be in any place and time. Because of being refugee, I've had to kind of think about this, right? Any place and time to still, there's a state. So whether it's COVID conditions or racism or bad district policies or whatnot, it's still, and that's very sustaining. There's a lot more around that, but I just want to put that out here, we moved into saying, what would it take? Our ALT started saying, the driving question we developed was, what would it take to have educational experiences that are affirming, liberatory, and transformational? And the three have to come together. Because sometimes when we talk about inclusion and belonging, we stay at the level of affirming. But that means you can have low expectations and still be very affirming, right? And a lot of people stick in sentimentality and justify that as DEI stuff. Liberatory is that state of mind where you're free from notions and somebody else's narrative, and that you're also free from being, really, here's the other work. When we struggle, we have suffering, and we don't know what to do with that suffering. It's not that we should evade suffering. It's that how do you be in relationship with that suffering so that you can then know the children and know the families. Because you can't just see their suffering, you have to know your own suffering. And so this thing about the being, this work is not, we gotta not do the work to liberate the children. We gotta work to liberate ourselves, to do the liberatory work ourselves, to know our own pain, to know our own vulnerabilities, our own shadows, our own stories. And if we don't think we have a story, then we're not really fully in the room to be with the children. And we're gonna live our stories through them. And that is not fully being present with them in front of you. You're living your story through them. So that's kind of
So we have time for maybe one more question, and then we'll take questions from the audience. I'm going to leave this very open for each of you. Each of you work with a school that's almost 100% low-income students of color. In your case, it's almost all Dominican American, and in your case, it's a real range of ethnicities and backgrounds. Both of you are in schools where kids feel heard and seen and proud of who they are. What are some specific things you do in your classroom or your school that make kids feel honored to be there? Because when I'm there, that's what I feel. What are some of the tangible things you do?
I would say the first thing that comes to mind, and it might sound very simple, but I learned their name. I know it sounds crazy, but like to me, I've been around places where like you have a classroom and 2 months in, you don't know like the kid's name or their name tags on the desk, which I think is cool. Name tags are cool. Like 2 weeks. But after 2 weeks, no, there should be no name tags. It's almost like a challenge to myself that I tell the kids the first day, you know, you get the roster, you read it. I work hard, try to pronounce their name. I ask for nicknames. If I come up with a nickname while I'm reading their name, I ask permission, like, yo, are you cool? Are you cool with this? There's a kid named Larry. And I don't know why with Larry, like, Lil Larry just came up. I think it was like an old rap song. It was like, Lil Larry. That's how I call Larry. Lil Larry. Anytime I say his name, it's Lil Larry. And then I realized, like, yo, I didn't even ask this kid, like, are you cool with me? And he goes, no, please. He's like, all my friends do it. If you didn't do it, I would. But it's like the presence of mind, like, first, are you cool with this nickname? 2, is it okay if I use the nickname? But knowing the name, knowing how to pronounce the name, and doing that within the first week. And I tell them, I'm going to know this. So they kind of begin to pick up, like, oh, he really cares about, like, this. And it's not service level. Like, I love your point, Minh, that it's not to kind of, like, do it for me, like I get a badge. Is showing respect to a person. Like, how do you respect the person without knowing their name? Like, at some point, we're gonna keep seeing each other. You should know my name and I should know your name. 2, I don't only talk to them when they're in my room. I know a lot of kids in the school that I have not even taught yet. Now, part of it is like strategy. You know, it's like, yo, I know I'm gonna teach you. We need a relationship. I remember growing up, I did not really respect adults who thought that I should just do what they told me to do just because they were an adult. To this day, like in my mind, that always bothered me. And I remember times when it was like, that is not cool. And I'm not gonna give you the respect because you're not giving it to me. So every interaction is one about like, building a relationship so we get to a mutual understanding of who we are and respect. So then if I ask you to do something, you're more likely to kind of see my point of view and maybe do it. If you decide you don't want to do it, we both have an understanding. It's like, okay, I see your point, you see my point, let's do this a certain way. So it's not just like I'm the grown up and I do it and you're gonna do it. Like, you know, sadly, society treats a lot of black and brown people like that anyway, and I'm not gonna feed into that, you know? Can I tell you a story about, like, there are these 2 kids, 11th graders, and I know I'm gonna have them next year. I've heard about these sisters for years, because they were in the middle school. One of them does not get the services that she should be getting. So I'm already aware of that like injustice in my mind. She spends the whole day in the hallway because she has been denied these services for the most of the time that she's been at the school, right? But I don't, so, and she also, it's kind of, you know, people kind of paint her as a behavior issue. But I'm like, I'm not gonna just roll up to you and see you as a behavior issue. What's the first thing you do? Like, yo, what's your name? So I found out the girl's name. She has a twin. There's actually triplets, but only 2 of them remain at the school. So I find out her name and her sister's name. But I'm really focusing on the one who like I think has been treated kind of like crappy by most of the school, right? And she's always angry. But really she's angry because she's hurt, to be honest, right? So I'm like, yo, I'm gonna say what's up to these girls every morning. At first it's just saying hello, right? But then if you just say hello and they don't think you really care, because if you don't really care, it's gonna come out in the interactions. But I'm like, yo, I'm really trying to like get to know you. So we have breakfast. Yo, what you eating for breakfast? I'm gonna just say the names because these days it plays out every day. So I'm like, yo, Maria, what's up with breakfast? Maria sometimes will just literally look at me and just give me a look like I did something to her. She will walk away. So I'm like, yo, Juana, what's up with Maria? And Juana's like, Espin. Sometimes she says it in Spanish, and I just start cracking up. But I don't take it personal because I'm just getting to know them, right? I'm trying to understand, what that morning is like for Maria and Juana. Why Juana might be this way and Maria might be that way, right? And so it sounds like it's simple, but that's like the real work of being. You're in the business of serving people. Like teaching is you're serving people. So you have to see them as people. What's your name? What do you like? How do you like me to call you? What do you like to talk about? Now, does that mean I'm best friends with everyone? No, because why? That would be disingenuous. Right? Some kids you just like, yo, we're not going to be best friends. But I'm going to respect you, and you're going to respect me. If I tried to be best friends with that kid, and he knew, like, I don't really like you, and you don't really like me, it's not going to work. But at least I don't really like you. And you don't really like me. That's okay too, right? I work with people like that. That's okay. But you respect the person. And it's just like that mutual understanding, like, yo, I'm not into manga. I'm not into anime. I'm not going to talk about that really that much. After you tell me what you're doing, conversation's probably going to go not that long. Is that okay? Yes. Why? Because it's real. But I show you love, you show me love, and then we could build off that. Then when I challenge you to be like, yo, your paragraph sucks, it could be way better, this claim is missing a reason, it doesn't align to the argument, you're going to be like, all right, bro. You know why? Because I know you're pushing me because you kind of care here, right? And kids see that, especially a teenager. Like, a teenager is all about that, right? Feeling like an adult, respecting me as an individual. So that's also why I love high school. I cannot do elementary, but.
That was beautiful.
Couple things. We use a weekly community meeting structure from the responsive classroom. We call it community meeting, 30 minutes on Zoom or live. It's a structure where there's joy, there's music, there's mindfulness. Mindfulness is not just a strategy, so y'all know that, but there's like breath work, there's recognition of students, there's authentic sharing, there's skits and silliness, a lot of laughter, and so there's just like a formula that we always hit and they always know. We always open with an opening where students are singing to each other. Before that, I hit the chime, we practice the breath. I teach them breath work. It's integrated. It's not like a separate thing. And they know it's community meeting. And I have always a mini lesson. And there's always a framework around power. I teach about power. And really reframing in elementary school, TK to 5, it's really important to teach children understanding of power because power is everywhere. Power is, we see it in the dysfunction, but we don't actually teach it in a way of like personal power, inner compass power. What does that look like? So we name power, we have 4 encompass superpowers. The power of stillness, right? I know my inner compass. I have gratitude for things in my life, and I can heal the hurt. Okay, when I listen to my inner compass. I have the power of knowledge being defined by I have many ways of knowing, and I can show my expertise, different ways of showing expertise, okay? Power of courage, that I can do what's right in my heart, whether anyone's looking, or whether there's 1,000 people looking in the age of social media, right? And then the power of right action is that I can create peace and cultivate positivity. Okay? So just be clear. So the other piece is being very clear on the buckets of what you're trying to build. So they have to know, and we practice it. So I might give a cape to a child that week that somebody really is highlighting the power. So we have, Encompass logo and just, converted some old fabric from whatever we have. So it's just making it silly, and then like we'd pause in the middle of the Zoom hybrid meeting and I'd run upstairs and put the cape on and come right back, and silliness, bring in your authentic self, doing things and that keeps it sustainable. So if you're a school leader or teacher, do things that are you. So if I'm teaching a song to them, it's a song that actually helps them practice how to stay in a liberatory state, right? The other piece is the transformational aspect. Affirming liberatory and transformational, right? Designing educational experience. It doesn't work unless you work on the transformation. Deeper learning to me is about that, okay? I have to know where I came from, I have to know where I am, I have to know where I'm going. So much of the work that we do is giving the analysis of what the current reality is, and we try to be like really good citizens by giving them the real. But then it's like if they aren't equipped about a sense of power and sense of like hope, that will contract. And for children of color, right? It's like, no, I can't deal with that. I don't want to hear more about slavery right now. Tell me all the good stuff, right? Like, so the transformation is like, okay, do you know your agency? So how do we do that? So we use thinking maps. This is, a form of organizing your thoughts through a particular set of organizers and a state of mind. So discipline. So I had a child, let's call him Muhammad. So he entrenched, hard to break through. Finally, what broke through was him talking about his story about being like his father. So I started mapping. Well, what about your father you want to be like? What is that? So mapping that and mapping where he is now, and then seeing the match, and then saying, where do we got to go? And using the right map, cause and effect map, double bubble, compare and contrast. You see, critical thinking embedded in thinking maps, really, really great for embedding that in. So from that, we learned from Muhammad, and built, and working with our literacy coach of what she's also learned working with high school youth for many years, we built a compass guide. And the theory of action is that if children know themselves and know their ancestors and their connection, and then they have dreams and they can capture it in paragraph writing, that they actually will then accelerate in the actual curricular material that's expected of them. And so we built a compass guide where they basically write, what's my dream day? What's my dream experiences in life? What's my favorite outfit? Something special to someone who's special to me, how I'm similar or different. And I can go on and on. So there's like 9 paragraphs that we write out, and different grades have different expectations around how many paragraphs you can write. Then we do a 4-foot feet, which is you have to know who your family members are. They could be biological or caregivers or whatnot, the important caregivers to you, and then their family members. And then you have to document, research it, and then have a story about them. It's been transformative. So that's just a concrete way that the idea is that if you know self, you can go below what's the reality now, go into your roots so that you can transcend, right? What we're doing now is we try to raise conscience by keeping the real, by only giving the hard stuff. Let's go deep, give them a deep, and then transcend.
So I'm conscious of time, and we're supposed to end now, but we'll stay up here. So those of you that want to walk over to the reception, we'll end. But if you have a question, come right up. We'll get into dialogue with you. And I want to end, Mingjum, with your words that you said to me outside, which is, she said, you guys call this deeper learning, but for me it's soul work. And it's really about getting kids in touch with the confidence in their soul is what this is really about. So deeper work for you is soul work, and I thought it was just beautiful. So I just want to thank you for being such humble and beautiful educators.